So I want to start with a little bit of context, and what I think is most interesting when you talk to founders, because there's nothing enjoyable about starting a SaaS company. What was the aha moment that led to Loop? What was the problem that you saw that nobody else was tending to?
Josh, this is my first time here, but I'm a regular listener and super excited to be on. Thanks for having me. Very excited to have this conversation with you. It feels a bit different on a recorded call, sharing these insights with you, but we keep exchanging this. So excited to do this here as well. So no, you're 100% right. Restaurant technology is probably the only idea that's worse than starting a restaurant. So how did I start a restaurant tech company? Well, I started with starting a restaurant. So I progressed linearly in the awfulness of ideas. I guess, I'm a classic food entrepreneur who just wanted my grandma's recipe to be available for me to eat and for posterity, but definitely for me. And it was just very hard to find it. And I had this realization that I will definitely eat it. I know several people that will love it and pay for it. And just thought maybe I should just go start a restaurant. And people looked at me, in a certain kind of way. And I was like, okay, this is a capped, small sort of spend. Instead of burning that, maybe I'll just start a restaurant. And turns out 6 months later, we were successful. Actually, cash flow positive. We were doing about 100 orders a day. And this was, 7, 8 years ago, and we're still operating the restaurant today. This is in Hyderabad, India. And I have a great friend, close friend, who's also an operating partner that basically ensures that the restaurant's running well. But I think the secret sauce that happened there, Josh, was we don't have service. It's a delivery-only restaurant. So we were basically on, Swiggy and Zomato, and back then Uber Eats, which are sort of the local delivery apps. And what that meant is we basically had a full console of everything from pricing to procurement in one place. So it's a business in an Excel sheet. You can control everything, you can understand everything, and you can close the loop on every single decision you take. So we made a lot of mistakes and we course corrected really fast. And the things that worked, we doubled down on really fast, right? So finding that right price, understanding which menu items actually work, menu experimentation, understanding our marketing strategy, just to make sure our flow through is optimized. You cannot do that in a very simple way. If it's one unit and you're a nerd, right? And you really like math and Excel sheets, different story with if you actually have in-store operations, so on and so forth. But that's sort of the seed of the idea. Fast forward to the pandemic, my sense of what delivery can be and how much it can actually be part of the prevailing culture completely changed, because overnight it went from being this thing that lazy people did to just being a sensible choice a working couple makes, right? Because they have better things to do and they want to save time. And that basically propelled a massive demand for restaurants. And for us, the aha moment was just like most of us, we were out in the community helping restaurants. And there was one restaurant here in the Bay Area. We loved the food from there. And one day we just drove up to her and we were like, hey, how's it going? Can we help you in any way? And she was almost in tears, basically saying, my entire in-store revenue stopped. It's fully, sort of delivery apps driven. This was, right around the pandemic. And I don't know how to manage it. We hopped in. A month later, there's a turnaround. She did some very touching things. She hosted a dinner with her friends and family, and she sort of put us on the spotlight. And we were like, oh my God, bits and bytes can have such a powerful impact on here. And there's something real happening, right, on the restaurant side. They're not really looking at this as an opportunity it's this disproportionate burden. It's a completely new business model, and they might actually be struggling to look at it the right way. And maybe there is a point of view that we can bring that's actually helpful for them. And that's sort of where it started.
So let's talk about that really quick because I host this like monthly restaurant marketing masterclass where like I teach all of these things, and in the genesis of it, Anand, was I don't think you can change somebody's life until you can change their mind. And so the goal of my business, of my life, is to help people see the industry the way that I see the industry, which I think is different. I think I'm a contrarian. And I think you are too. I think that you are very business and systems oriented in a business that feels very rooted in artistry, creativity, and manufacturing. Um, how do you see the industry? And like, what is that? How do you see it differently than most of the people you begin to serve?
One of my favorite topics right here. So I like to. I'm a student of history. I love to sort of study, how we have come to live in a future that was, live in the present that was a future for a different time, and one of the ways to look at what's happening right now and the frame of reference is probably best understood when we actually look at drive-through. So if you'll actually look at drive-through, what happened was first we got cars. There were enough number of cars for us to build roads, and the roads got big and efficient, so much so that we started a suburbia, and all the industries were in the cities, and people couldn't live next to the industries, so there was a lot of cars driving around. And honestly, like candidly, women started to work at scale. So what was unthinkable a few generations ago, a few decades ago, was now possible, unlocking a massive GDP. But at the same time, it was, there is that poster of that San Francisco woman sort of like going into the industry and starting to work. So there was this demographic shift in terms of who's cooking and who's working. And it was like everybody's working. And and the question is, where does food come from? And I think the innovators and entrepreneurs of the country gave us a solution at the intersection of fast food and drive-through. Right? They basically said, eat in your car, and here is an amazing sort of new concept. And there was this explosion of sort of food created by economic conditions that preceded well, before, and sort of that was that perfect storm that led to that explosion of everything from McDonald's, down. We are in a very similar time, and let me explain how. So the catalyst for all of this is actually the mobile phone, right? So you basically have mobile phones with everybody, and it has internet. And that fundamentally gives, that fundamentally unlocks consumers who can install apps, but more importantly, it unlocks a gig economy, right? There is a large enough set of people that are willing to, drive, deliver, so on and so forth, Uber, so on and so forth. But the other piece of it is there are social networks by virtue of these internet carrying mobile phones, which effectively amplify discovery, right? And being able to sort of find out which restaurant is good, so on and so forth. And now that has created the perfect storm in terms of this massive latent demand for consumers. A lot of people somehow equate delivery to convenience. Convenience is not a new thing, right? It preceded drive-through, right? When people in effectively agrarian America were moving into urban sort of centers, that led to Heinz ketchup and Kellogg's cereal, right? That was convenience. Packaged goods is a convenient thing to do, as against like making, like literally like
Sure.
farming. And I think there is no the convenience piece is not new. That's always sort of the human instinct to do so that you can spend time elsewhere. Mass production of food is the obviously more efficient thing to do as humans, and offering more selections is obviously better for all of us. We get to enjoy so many more recipes. Trust me, there wasn't Asian cuisine in the 1800s, right? And we get to like enjoy amazing Thai food and things like that today by virtue of that explosion. But regardless, I think the the interesting framing here is that delivery is this new revolution that's happening. It's a facet of this new revolution. In fact, there's this massive growth in digital ordering. Consumers are moving further away from the kitchen, going and doing things that they are passionate about. It could be AI, it could be being a social media creator, whatever that is. And that's catalyzing this massive demand. And as you look out into the future, we are looking at drones and bots and autonomy and so on and so forth. And this is just the beginning, right? This is not the end. And all of these very interesting changes are happening because of these, mobile phones with internet, social networks, so on and so forth. So that's the framing. That's the right sort of level of zoom for us to look at what's happening. And, especially when somebody says delivery is a necessary evil, it's a passing cloud, it happened during the pandemic, it's going to go away, or I'm going to convert my third-party customers into first-party customers because all of those marketplaces are going to like die. I feel that it might or might not be true, but it comes from a place of like, this is just a passing cloud. It's not looking at it the right way, and I think that's that's the perspective. That's a contrarian perspective, I guess, that you could take to what's happening.
Well, and then if we get down to the core issue, so I think what makes me different in the market and potentially a unique voice, if you can say that without sounding like an obnoxious jerk, is the idea that I was at NRA years and years and years ago when I was an early stage restaurateur. And I was listening to this guy talk, and he said, everybody's got it wrong. There's no such thing as a bottom line issue. There's only such a thing as a top line issue. And if you make enough money, it all goes away. Everyone thinks they have 1,000 problems and they only have one, and it's money. Because when you make enough money, you can just throw that money at the problems you have. And it was like a paradigm shift for me. And that's when I stopped worrying about everything other than marketing, which was like a greenfield opportunity, right? Because, I ended up in this position where like I'm doing this thing that directly translates to money and no one else is doing the thing. And I see you as a unique voice as well, because as it relates to delivery, like there's all of this noise out there. But what you talk about and what Loop focuses on is delivery performance, which I think is a massive blind spot. Can you define what delivery performance is in your own words?
Absolutely. So that's a great framing, actually, Josh. And I think the data in terms of what's happening with the industry is something all of us have to digest first. There are two sort of like data points that I'll present to you that we need to sort of pay close attention to before we go any further. The first data point is that we basically have the food away from home and food at home index, and people are actually, and it's at 60% in terms of how much people are spending in the $3 trillion budget, where they're basically saying, I'm going to not make food at home in terms of getting groceries and actually doing it. I'm actually going to eat outside, drive through, order, pick up, whatever, right? Or go to a food court, so on and so forth. So that's at 60%, and it moved like 10 absolute points in the last decade, right? So probably in the last 5 years, but it has moved. Basically, more people are eating outside, number one. Number two, especially in Q4, when you looked at sort of these, the broader restaurant market results, we saw a lot of reds. We saw a lot of like pullbacks, softening macros, so on and so forth. You contrast that with what's happening on digital platforms. Let it be marketplaces, let it be order aggregators, let it be first-party ordering apps. All of them reported extreme amounts of growth, right? Anything from 10 to 20%. We saw that at Loop as well, where customers on Loop across, close to $4 billion of revenue we see, saw about 10% growth year on year.
Wait, say that again, because I think that's important. Because again, If I am an expert at anything, it's because I have a larger sample size than everyone else because of all of the restaurants I work with, right? Um, you've powered $4 billion in delivery revenue. So it's not like you're looking at a small segment, like you are looking at a massive chunk.
Absolutely, Josh. We are very fortunate, to be trusted by thousands of restaurant locations across hundreds of brands. We look at about $4 billion of delivery, digital, catering, ordering, growing really fast, across the board. Pretty large sample size, even if you assume that it's $150 billion market. There might be a little bit of selection bias because customers of Loop are all very digital and delivery forward. And there is a little bit of selection bias there where these are the most sophisticated operators leaning early into this segment, trying to get that right. But that said, I think we saw tremendous amount of growth. And I think the thing to note there is all of these platforms and how much ordering, like think of Olo, right? Olo basically went public off of, a hockey stick growth just around the pandemic. Like there was just so much rise in digital ordering. That did not go back. It kept raising, right? The
Right.
marketplaces were barely $5 billion big in 2015. They're $150 billion, if not more, now. And this is not limited to the US. It's actually true in Europe, China, Deliveroo, sort of Didi, I think, in China, or Meituan, one of those two. Grab, Singapore, kind of, it's actually true everywhere in the world. And the underlying thing there is that, what you said in terms of like the only problem here is growth actually applies a lot to this channel, which is consumers are going out, they're eating outside, and the way and a significant majority of them are sort of opting in to use these apps and lean into them. So maybe the first thing to do is to go and capture that market and be front and center and go meet your customers where they are, right? And that's the central sort of belief, right? That we see in a lot of restaurant operators that's hard to change, which is, you could look at this sort of revenue stream as, it's loss making, it's low margin, I'm losing money, it's going to go away, I'm just going to like look at it the other way, versus no, like this is actually, the customers that are coming here are loyal. 60 to 80% of them keep coming back. They stick on that platform. It's been growing year on year. Whatever marketing spend I do is giving me a deterministic return. Of course, I have to figure out my flow through. Of course, I have to figure out my order level unit economics. But the most important thing here is, how do I focus on actually leaning in, growing, and meeting customers where they are? And once you have that frame of reference, everything changes.
Isn't it interesting though? So, and I'm going to say you're a restaurateur too. So like I think we can have this honest, candid conversation. So, and I've probably always been, even though I've always functioned as a restaurateur, I've probably always been a marketer, first and foremost, at least in my own mind. Um, in every other industry, including like the industries you and I sit in now, like there are these open, candid conversations around the cost to acquire a customer. And yet, in the restaurant industry, by and large, when you talk to restaurant owners, like nobody wants to pay anything to acquire a customer. When I would argue that like these marketplaces are a great opportunity to create awareness and gain new customers in an area that is of incredibly high intent. And so what I see is I see that everyone's working to mitigate cost and plug leaks, when I think the goal is to win the algorithm, which is what you advocate for. So what does winning the algorithm look like?
Great question, Josh. So let's double click on the CAC aspect a little bit more. Cost to acquire customers, customer acquisition cost, lots of different ways to sort of say the same thing in terms of like, how much are you spending? How are you thinking about the return on investment there? So we live in a world where Google ads and Meta ads and all of these ways to acquire customers are actually pretty expensive. And then there are people that are actually tapping into it through social media, which is like basically free. And you could also do a variety of things, including marketplaces, including being on the right channels, where you can actually get a steady stream of customers at some cost to it. And you're 100% right in the sense that the person that's actually sitting down streaming YouTube or Netflix, watching on TV, maybe they see an ad for a brand, they're probably ordering delivery. Maybe they're playing a game and they're doing that, or maybe they're just at work. They had this last minute meeting and they're just ordering an app. And the first thing is like, they probably go to the group chat and they're like, hey, what's a good Chinese place close by? Somebody says, hey, you should definitely try this, and they just quickly order. I think the underlying foundations for sort of acquiring customers are there. But how do you crack the algorithm in terms of being top of mind the moment customers actually go in there, right? So the way to actually think about it, and the right framing there, is understanding what the mechanics of the algorithm is and what the state marketplaces operate is, right? So if you look at our customers, and this might be unique, it's a large enough sample, but it might be unique, but it's true, 60 to 80% of the entire revenue that our customers get is coming from recurring customers. These people are coming back, ordering again and again from the same place. It's no different from a loyalty program that you might put in place, right? So not only are the customers that are coming on marketplaces just loyal to the brand, they're actually loyal to the marketplace because they're paying like $100 to buy that subscription. They're ordering 8 to 12 times, not as a one-time thing, but as an actual permanent fixture and a replacement. And the word there, a keyword there, is rotation. Are you part of the rotation for somebody? If they're ordering 10 times, are you in one of the 8 that they regularly order from? Maybe they're trying a new place every couple times in a 10. And that's the key question to ask. Are you part of somebody's rotation? Meaning, are you producing a product and are you keeping up your brand promise through great operations? Of course. Where if somebody comes to your brand, it becomes part of their rotation and they stick. And if the answer to that is yes, and we'll talk about how we can do that well, then it's a win-win-win. It's in the marketplace's interest to put you front and center. It's, of course, in your brand's interest to go attract and keep that customer. How does it matter what the channel is as long as they're loyal to you? And, of course, it's in the interest of the customer to find this amazing new food that they can brag about. And, they can just basically in the group chat go and like, do you guys know what I just discovered today? Of course, when you think about marketplaces, there is the problem of selection. Marketplaces kind of get customers and send them away. Of course, you mess up and you're not treating those customers as you would your own guest. Of course, the customer is going to feel that, and the marketplaces would be ready to replace your Thai food with another Thai restaurant. For sure, a selection is one of their strengths. But in the absence of, any hiccups, you're probably actually going to retain that customer for a really long time. We did an analysis for one of our customers. We realized that if a customer effectively orders the second time in the first month, they effectively end up ordering a total of 6 times over 6 to 8 weeks. So basically, they're ordering pretty much every week or the other week over the next 8 months. So they're part of the rotation, right? Of course, it's a salad concept. There's a specific criteria that your cuisine and the way that your brand is set up plays a big role into it. But 6 to 8 times over the next 60 days is insane, right? That's a very loyal customer.
Dude, that's incredible frequency. Incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's the key in terms of like being able to attract and retain customers, which is as long as you're doing those repeat orders and making sure that you build that loyalty base and you look at it that way, you're fine, right? You will be pushed on top. Your ratings will naturally be high. By virtue of great operations, your inaccuracy rates, cancellation rates, etc., are going to be good. And it's in the marketplace's incentive to actually push you high. So effectively, this is probably cliche, but I think the answer is great operations, sticking to the brand promise, and with a good dose of menu experimentation to see what your customers like to sort of reorder and keep.
As a true contrarian, I love a good punch in the gut. And I heard you say publicly that most restaurants are paying DoorDash to promote their competitors. And I was absolutely nauseated by the words that came out of your mouth. Um, and I just thought, oh my God, like that's one hell of a statement to make. But again, like you're pushing $4 billion worth of delivery. So, like, you would know. Break that down for me.
Yeah. So, in terms of how marketplaces operate, um, one of the important facets of marketplaces is their ads platform, is their marketing and ads platform. So a lot of brands have, especially this year, or over the past couple of years, have actually doubled their investment in marketplace ads and promotions, and they're doing so much to effectively go and attract customers from these marketplaces that it's pretty mind blowing in terms of how much they're leaning in, right? And it's kind of mind blowing and perplexing in terms of the inconsistency that we hear about the decrease in brands, and maybe there's a little bit of haves and have-nots. All of the people that are actually going and leaning into these marketplaces, building a great product that can actually deliver well for a customer away from home, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they're sort of leaning into the marketplace as well. Uber Eats, for instance, launched keyword search, which is you can actually sort of like promote your brand by virtue of like boosting a specific keyword, maybe a soup or a salad, and you get promoted there. So it's awesome to sort of see not only the marketplaces sort of coming up with more and more innovative concepts to sort of funnel that 10-20% growth they are seeing. They're seeing restaurants and sort of the brands that are delivery and digital forward leaning into those brands and attracting those customers. The natural thing there is when you basically attract a customer, maybe 3 out of 10 times, they're actually completely new to the marketplace and they're completely new to you as well. And if you don't do a great job of actually retaining the customer, they're probably going to the next. So it's important to sort of look at the marketing strategy more contextually, more broadly, in terms of how does that fit into your brand sort of like marketing policy. And a lot of brands on Loop actually include the delivery marketing spend and the rules of the road for what kind of spends they'll do. Like, for instance, they might not offer discounts at all, right? They might have specific ads, they might have specific item-based promotions. They sync their calendars in tandem with everything else, not looking at this piece as sort of this external thing, trying to kind of keep that incremental customer hooked and anchored. So my sort of takeaway from looking at how this place is, you can actually do sort of marketing, or you can be on a marketplace in a way where it's actually helping your competitor by introducing selection if you sort of look the other way, right? If you're actually not treating it as a first-class citizen in terms of attracting and keeping your customers. And probably that's something that people should pay a lot of attention to.
Because for a lot of folks, I think it feels like checking a box, right? Like we need to offer delivery, so we do, but it never becomes a legitimate revenue vertical for us because we don't treat it like a legitimate revenue vertical.
Yeah, that's basically having the worst of all worlds, in some ways, because effectively what's happening is, if you are basically, maybe I'll tell you a story about one of our brands actually did this experiment with one of the marketplaces where they said, hey, let's actually measure incrementality. What is the overlap between customers that are loyal to our brand or recurring versus the customers that are coming from marketplaces? And they found that it's low single digit percent. I don't remember what the exact number was, but there's barely any overlap. And that makes sense, right? Because the marketplace loyalty customers are actually paying the marketplaces in order to go there to order. What's the odds that they're maintaining a roster of 5 or 6 loyalty programs and ordering, right? And then there are other sort of considerations in terms of ease of use and convenience and the post-order experience, all of which are very strong differentiators for the marketplaces, instant support, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I think the way that you could sort of think about think about being on these marketplaces and leveraging them and leaning into them is setting your margin profile on it well, and looking at that customer as a returning loyal customer that you want to serve right, and basically not look at this as sort of a checkbox that's potentially somehow leading to customers coming in and discovering you there,
Right.
and then converting into first party ordering. Although um, there is some value in making sure that whenever you're launching new stores to be on marketplaces as well, right from day one,
It's a tool
because
for awareness, is it not?
absolutely it's a tool for awareness, and it's a tool for telling a new sort of a locality that you're actually available closer than you were ever before.
So, and we're gonna link to it in the show notes because I just thought it was so cool. You talked at the very beginning of the episode about being a student of the game, and one of the things that you are is not just an expert in your business, but an expert in delivery in general. And you guys came out with a report, which was the 2025 State of Delivery. And I mean, I could spend the next 45 minutes talking about like what I found shocking about the report, but if you could highlight just one thing in it that you were like, whoa, like as somebody that's pushed $4 billion in delivery, even I find this statistic shocking.
Yeah, probably the most shocking thing is the pricing inflation stopped and it actually deflated a little bit, right? So actually what's shocking there is that there was a reset a couple of years ago where all the marketplaces were pushing for better economics on the marketplace. Like you can't just keep increasing price. That's not how the world works.
Sure.
You can't just say that the customer is price insensitive. There is no demand elasticity and keep increasing price to a point where marketplaces are just perceived as expensive. That wasn't working for anybody. And there was a big push to like, hey, let's get the markups under control and the prices and the inflation on marketplace under control. I think what actually happened this year is we felt that a lot of brands actually organically arrived at that conclusion that maybe they're actually priced too high. And I'm not talking about like people sort of like discounting, the price less than what they would offer in store. I'm talking about like coming down from that 25% markups, right? And they were basically setting up very, very high sort of price increases, way higher than what they were paying in commission, for sure. And even though that's a very valid reason, you want to set that margin profile up in a way where you're not losing money. But I think it was interesting to watch the price trend sort of go down, where it felt like the brands that were leaning in in a way where they're treating those customers as first-class citizens too, and offering them a fair deal, right? Not a value deal. That obviously depends on the brand, but just a fair price, right? And it takes a little bit of work to get the margin profile right, so that you're not giving your store away, inclusive of your commissions, your marketing, your markups, so on and so forth, and do that in a way that's sort of right for every season and for every offer construct that you produce. But it is possible, to run an extremely profitable business without having an insane amount of markups and sort of looking the other way.
Well, and if we look at the other direction, so something that I found fascinating, because again, I am compelled by data at this point in this age in my life. And your report shows that certain promotions, right, get a 3 to 5x return on an investment. But I would argue, and the data shows it, like most operators are either avoiding them entirely or running them incorrectly. What's the smarter way to market our businesses on those platforms?
Absolutely. Great question. So the marketplaces offer a lot of things that are a first. So one of the first things that they offer is the ability to target a specific cohort for each and every one of your locations independently in order for you to drive sales. So previously, when you thought about marketing, you would actually think about a nationwide campaign or a region-wide campaign where you're basically including every location, and you're effectively doing it mostly as a way to like attract or retain a large cohort of customers. You are rarely breaking it down all the way down to the location, all the way to the specific cohort, figuring out what exact construct you need to target and do that specifically. So that ability to effectively come up with a hyper targeted way to actually deploy your marketing um, is burdensome, right? It offers this paradox of choice where it's like it's too much to do, but and fully heard on how hard it is to like actually manage that. But at the same time, if you actually do it, if you actually think about first principles, like what is this location at, what is this store at in terms of revenue, what's my visibility, is it a college town, is it like a vacation spot, is it actually a downtown, is it suburban, is it a suburban region, what sort of the population mix, what is that specific location catering to in terms of demographics and customer base. You can be very, very thoughtful about actually finally targeting what actually specifically applies to that cohort of customers in that location, and run that at scale. So I think there isn't one specific type of campaign or one specific strategy that just blanket works and applies for everybody. It and it doesn't have to. In the world of marketplaces, you can actually get down to the science of like exactly how to deploy your marketing dollars and control them by the hour as well. Like you can actually stop them. So that gives you a lot of like specificity and ability to make mistakes, ability to run tests and see what works and doesn't work. So my general, I think the 3 to 5x is a good rule of thumb in terms of what the return on investment is. But I would strongly recommend taking a very location and cohorted approach to deploying the spend as against sort of blanketing one specific campaign across the board.
Well, and I want to get into how we could do that because, again, I think that hyper targeting is huge. But I also, what I want to talk about next is like the ability to think long term. So, it's really easy to look at like a singular delivery order and the commission and the expense relative to that particular order. What benefited me as a restaurateur was looking at LTV, lifetime value, right? Like once I've got you, what else could I sell you? There's a lot of statistics around, people order more when they order the second and third and fourth time, right? Because they've built trust with that brand. And so when we think about lifetime value, what ends up changing is the way that we treat that first engagement with that customer. I don't think this becomes a legitimate channel and a legitimate profit center for anyone listening unless like from the get it's treated that way. And I think that it's really easy, I think at this stage in the conversation, to say like, shit, one more thing, right? Like this is one more thing I need to do. It's one more thing I need to manage. And you've called Loop this performance layer for marketplaces. And I want to push you here because how do you see yourself helping restaurants higher leverage these platforms to benefit themselves in the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Loop AI does is we take a measure, protect, and grow approach to the marketplace. We are at the end of the day engineers. So we break down the data and get to the science of actually how each order flow through works. So one of the first questions we answer right when we get into a partnership is, what are the order level unit economics, right? How much are we actually making on every single order? And what are the different sort of modalities, even within the marketplace, where they're able to actually make money on the order, so on and so forth. And that's with an understanding of your COGS model, your labor model, so on and so forth. Now, the way that it actually helps us understand what we can do to actually drive growth and also save costs is by looking at all of the different aspects that are actually affecting the order in a very scientific way. The hard part about it is it actually takes pulling a ton of reports, cleaning the data, transforming it, merging it together, and sitting down. And having done this, in the early days of Loop for many of our customers and for my own restaurant, it's no easy task, right? It can take several days, if not weeks, even to do a one pass run. And I'll save the burden of sort of doing all of that for you. You can check out our product at loopai.com, where we can actually give you a quick sneak peek of what that looks like for you, what your order level profitability is. And ultimately, once we have that established, we take the guesswork out, right? So at every single order, at every single campaign, every single one of your locations, understanding your order level unit economics, your lifetime value, your return on investment, your taxes, uh, losses that you're seeing on an order, so on and so forth. You bubble that up and get to a granularity where you sort of design, that channel to have a great gross margin. So, what can you do to actually set it up in a way where you're designing it for a 16% flow through? Maybe it's 2% lower than what it is for in store, but it's also 20% incremental. And by the way, what does that actually look like for me over the next year, right? How much am I expecting from each store? How do I actually expect the marketing spend allocations to be made? And all of that can actually be generated um, down to every store and order level today, with the help of AI. And it's possible to leverage that and communicate that with all of the store managers and the marketing team and the finance teams in a way that um, effectively deeply embeds this channel into your brand, as against looking at it as not my customer, not my problem.
You know, I think if we were to get to the root of the root, right? I think that foundationally, the fear in everybody's head is if I scale up this channel, I'm making more work, I'm not making more money. And fundamentally, I think that's what you're trying to solve for, which is why I thought it was worth having you on the show, because I think it's a noble endeavor. I think that if we all, as overwhelmed as all restaurateurs are, right? If we were all able to just attribute just a little bit of bandwidth to how do I make this work for me, because it needs to work. I can remember, as we were refining the channels in my own restaurants, and I'll never forget, I was like walking the dog with my mom. And I was talking to her about like our email strategy and our SMS strategy and how this wasn't working and that wasn't working. She was like, "Well, when are you just gonna throw in the towel?" And I was like, "I'm not. Like, I can't, like, these things have to work within my business." And I think one of the things that's become readily apparent over the last 10 to 100 years is that, like, we have to be able, like, these have to be sustainable business models, and we do that by making money more than one way across multiple channels that all have varying but significant levels of profitability. And so, for me, going into a new year, it really felt like a wake-up call that, like, if delivery isn't working for you, the solution, I don't think, is to ignore it. It's to use it. It's to leverage it to make it work for you. And I love you because, one, the product itself is basically free, right? Like, just in what they make on chargeback recoveries, it's going to cover the entire cost of the product itself. But also, like, it's not an expense, it's an investment that I think has a really high ROI. And I don't say that because you're on the show, and I don't say that because you're a friend. I say it because I really genuinely do mean it. But I think it speaks to a lot of the other things that you've developed as a strategy. One of those is around visibility. You know, everybody wants to rank higher. They want to get featured. They want to win more eyeballs. And I think that there's this ideology in our industry that, like, DoorDash is out to get you, or Uber Eats is out to get you, or they're trying to depress or repress me on the platforms. And the truth is, like, they don't care. Like, they don't like or dislike any of us. Like, it's exclusively rooted in being able to achieve some level of sell through, repeat sell through. That's what it's looking for. And so, I would ask you, when people are looking at their delivery infrastructure now, what are things they should be doing differently tomorrow to be seen more and to generate more business?
Yeah, great question. The starting point for this is to look at your operational metrics and make sure that you listen to what your customers are saying in terms of um, the order errors, inaccuracies, that missed sort of add-on, so on and so forth. Some of that has an impact on the menu design. You have to simplify your menu, obviously, so that it's not hard for customers to expect the right thing, but also your team to make the right product. Some of it has to do with just some of the annoyances with a digital stack. It's a completely new thing. You might have forgotten to turn your store on. You might have forgotten to bring your out of stock item back on, and it's probably just like missing completely, and things like that. And ultimately, it's very it sort of, when you're looking at the channel, it's very important to really think through what the end experience is for the vast majority of customers on the channel, and really get to the root of, am I treating them as my customer, in terms of somebody who's consuming my product, and is that product great? And if it is missing something, if it's missing the beat, getting to the bottom of like where that is. And the good news is, delivery actually stands out relative to any other channel in terms of the density of feedback. Every single order, every single, it's not like Google Maps. It's not like somebody's going and leaving a review and you don't know what order they're referring to. You actually have exactly which order they're talking about, when it was delivered, what time it was prepared, and who was at the store at that time. So you can actually fully understand the nature of each of those things. So that's probably the first starting point. And in terms of getting up on marketplace, I think there's a ton of wisdom around pricing right, making sure that your pictures and the way that you design the menu on the marketplaces are right, and ultimately you have to make a choice. You have to make a decision about your growth strategy on the marketplaces, and the ads and promotions have been working really well for brands that use them the right way. So there is addition there to make in terms of how much spend do I allocate here. Of course, it has to be margin aware. It has to be food cost aware. It has to keep in mind sort of the labor constraints of what happens if I add more orders at this time. That's another choice to make as well.
I think a lot of it comes down to intention. And again, when it's an afterthought, I think there's very little intention. But I just want to highlight what you just said, because I think it's incredibly important, which is, I don't think we just upload our menu with the same exact menu item names and descriptions and the same layout. Delivery is a very different use case. And I think that if we are exposing people to our brands initially, maybe it's not everything. Maybe it's the things we want to be known for, right? And the photography is directed towards a delivery market so that they can see what it's going to look at. People eat with their eyes. I think that it's always been treated as like a stepchild. I think it is amazing in this industry how quickly we forget how important some of these channels can be. We have very short-term memories. And then again, I think strategy is huge. Just to underline what you've said, like again and again and again, it's that to do these things in isolation isn't worth much, but if it is part of a cohesive strategy, which you're happy to advise on, that's huge. As you look forward, what does winning in delivery look like in 2026? What do you see on the horizon? As it relates to being everywhere, owning direct channels, or just knowing the game better? What are you guys looking to? How are you advocating for your clients?
Yeah, so ultimately, we are trying to work backwards from where customers are going, right? And if there is growth, and there is, that consumers are choosing demand, are choosing to give that demand in a specific channel. The core intention there is to go and take it, right? So it's like, hey, how do we actually go serve that customer, go meet them where they are, and lean into that. So and the best way to think about it is, we saw about 10% growth last year. We are seeing similar numbers starting this year, and it's probably going to be something similar as well, plus or minus 2%. So expect to grow, and expect to sort of factor in that growth rate for everything from labor to food to sort of your delivery strategy as a whole. And the second thing is delivery is actually probably the only channel where you can get very scientific about your order level unit economics and flow through. Expect to be 10 or 20% less than the store, although there are some of our customers who actually do more on delivery systematically in terms of the margin profile. Design for a good margin, right? And strategize around it. So I think I would probably, especially as you look at this year, I would say forecast for growth, forecast for profitable growth.
Most people would know this by listening to you, but you're young. You're very young. You're like 14 years old. It's insane. I like nothing about that, but I do respect it. And you look at the average lifespan of a restaurant is 5 years, right? And then I think there's an 80% failure rate in the first 5 years. And you've owned a restaurant for 8. And then you look at the average lifespan of a SaaS company, and I believe that it's 5 months, something like that. And you guys have, raised massive amounts of money, and you've scaled massively, beautifully, in what is just an incredibly competitive environment as it relates to the restaurant industry. And I believe that success leaves clues. So here you are, like you said at the top of the conversation, right? And like two of the hardest businesses to be in, and you're doing well. And I would ask you, like, when you look at yourself and your worldview and your tactics and your tools and your strategies, what has served you well that maybe we could steal and use to make our lives and our businesses better?
I'm incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by an amazing set of people. Josh, ultimately, I think my superpower has been to convince people that are much more smarter and capable than me to come and join this mission. I would say that to everybody that's probably thinking about starting a restaurant or starting a restaurant tech company, worse yet, is to think through not just the first set of customers, first set of problems, but the first set of people that will come join you. And I think sometimes I joke, Loop was basically an elaborate reason for me to get to work with some of the best people I know. And this has been a really fun experience. And I think ultimately hospitality is a business of of the people with the people. So my recommendation is to make sure that this extremely brutal and hard journey is worthwhile by spending time with people that you care about, that you respect, that challenge you, and you can have a beer with.